talk about. So I can't do that. I just like to remind you and the people who are listening at large that my favorite move that the Republican Party made that shows you guys up as a bunch of liars is when Livingston was in front of the House saying how immoral Clinton was while he was himself participating in a 10-year affair.
Well, typical of leftists, this caller has nothing in what I said, has nothing to say about what I said. I gave a lot of detail. Every time I characterized whether it was the Democrats or Noam Chomsky, I gave a concrete, specific fact. The one fact he gives is of Bob Livingston's moment of confession that he himself had the affair. And what he doesn't realize about the story is that it's an example of, since we're all human and we're all fallible, it was an example of Bob Livingston gave up a seat, of course, that was his life ambition. The greatest, he was a politician who gave up the greatest political honor he had gotten in order not to be a hypocrite. So the example brought up by the viewer proves the exact opposite of what he was claiming.
Erie, Pennsylvania.
Good morning, Connie.
Morning.
Mr. Horowitz, thank you so much, especially for the defense of our courageous troops. I think we really, really need to continue the discussion to keep them in the limelight, especially against Michael Moore's depiction. What I'm especially bothered by from this convention was what Robert Novak said in an article called United Democrats. And he talked about what was not in the convention, 3 divisive social issues that Mr. Kerry chose to leave out, and it's about Mr. Kerry's votes. And what he votes against is his own Catholic Church's teaching on abortion to begin with. We found out in the convention he did give CPR to a hamster, but he votes to kill innocent unborn babies, even partially born ones. He also votes, against the Federal Marriage Amendment, or he didn't vote at all for that, voted against the Defense of Marriage Act, and says that he, supports marriage as one man and one woman. He votes with the feminist reproductive rights folks he even sponsored a bill with Hillary on, making more condoms available when the church's position is abstinence. And Mr. Bush is the person who reflects my Catholic views in his votes. He is pro-life, he is pro-abstinence, and he's pro-marriage.
Thanks, Erie.
Yeah, I think the worst thing to be said about John Kerry is that he really doesn't take responsibility for any position that he takes, that it's all a cover-up and a fudging and a flip-flopping, that he has no moral center whatsoever, and is a human being incapable of making important decisions. He has no vision, which is the last person that you would want to be in the White House, in the commander-in-chief's position in the midst of a war on terror.
Have you ever been able to find out whether Senator Kerry quotes Noam Chomsky or is a follower of his?
No, the problem with the impact of Chomsky, as it can be seen, for example, in the Michael Moore film. I mean, Kerry, even though he was trying to cover up at the convention, did talk about, he said, I will not be a president who misleads. Now, this is the most disgusting charge, really, the Democrats have made. It's interesting how, you watch them on television and they whine about the sex thing with Clinton. I happen to be somebody who feels that the Clinton impeachment was unfortunately too much about sex and not enough about having a perjurer in the White House who was derelict in the war on terror. I mean, if you'll recall, the Clinton team had taken hundreds of thousands of dollars from the Chinese Communist government and its intelligence services illegally for campaign funds. That's what it should have been about. That's what it should have been about, but wasn't. But the charge that George Bush deliberately misled the American people and therefore sent their sons and daughters into war to die needlessly and to endanger Americans is the most heinous and unsubstantiated charge ever directed at a president. I mean, it actually was directed at Roosevelt by critics who said that he knew about Pearl Harbor and let it happen. The fact is that we have liberated, that the Bush administration has liberated 50 million people, that thanks to the George Bush, the terrorists are on the defensive and have not been able to attack us in 3 years. And we have now a military and intelligence base in Iraq, which is on the border of two terrorist countries, Syria and Iran. And if you want to understand how the Democrats have stabbed this nation in the back, consider Iran, which we now know was aiding al-Qaeda, which has nuclear weapons, which we should be confronting. But how can Bush confront Iran when he has a divided country with an entire party having its knives out and cutting him off, attempting to cut him off at the knees, saying that he's a liar? I mean, the American president doesn't have the credibility he should have because he has a divided nation. And dividing the nation in the midst of a war is about as serious an act that an opposition party can do. It is a disloyal opposition. And I make no apologies about laying this charge on the Democrats, who at their own convention accused George Bush of being unpatriotic, to at least Jimmy Carter, Teresa Heinz Kerry, Teddy Kennedy, and so forth. So why should they be exempt from this kind of language?
By the way, if you haven't seen it, there's a story in the papers today saying that Kuwait has banned the Michael Moore Fahrenheit 9/11. They say that it deems the movie insulting to the Saudi Arabian royal family and critical of America's invasion of Iraq, an official said yesterday. Next is Crystal, Minnesota.
Good morning, Madam and Sir.
Morning.
Yeah, my comment is our country, our political leaders don't even know if we're at war or not. I called up Senator Mark Dayton's office, asked him this question: are we in a formal state of war? And he said, his office said yes. I called up Senator Coleman's office, asked him the same question. He said no. I called up Congressman Mark Dayton's office, asked him. They didn't even know he declared war. I called up the FBI. They said yes. And it's expected the Army would say no because they never know. And by the way, I'm a red-headed lefty who got popped at an anti-war rally 2 hours before I enlisted in the military. So protesting against something you think is wrong is not unpatriotic, in my opinion.
Well, I never said it was. What's unpatriotic, well, we don't leave out the words. What's unacceptable is in the midst of a war, and in this case, it happened on the day we liberated Baghdad, that Nancy Pelosi attacked the president saying the war cost too much. It was the swiftest, most costless, least costly war in human history, is that when your troops are on the field of battle, and when both parties have endorsed a war, when the Clinton administration, before this administration, called for this war, in the middle of the battle, as one of the two major parties, to attack the president as a liar, to accuse him of sending Americans to die needlessly, is unconscionable. It's dividing the country in the face of the enemy. This is very different from citizens protesting. Although, if I may, you didn't say what war you protested. In this Iraq war, all the major anti-war demonstrations were led by people who hate America. This was led by the Workers' World Party, International Answer. They're Bolsheviks by their own description. They support North Korea. And United for Peace and Justice, the moderate peace coalition is led by an American communist named Leslie Kagan. And I don't mean she actually was a member, but when I say communist, I mean this is a woman who supports Fidel Castro, who supports every anti-American agenda, who is a Marxist, who wants a revolution in this country. These are the people who supported the demonstrations. And if you looked at the signs and the slogans and listened to the speeches, they call for revolution in this country. They claim that this was all about blood for oil. You don't hear that too much anymore, but you don't hear any apologies for that slander of the United States. They called America the axis of evil. I learned over a long political life that you better take seriously what people say. It's not just rhetoric. And may I say, I don't agree with the government of Kuwait in banning the Michael Moore film. Michael Moore is a supporter of the terrorists. He has compared the terrorists in Iraq, to American patriots, to the Minutemen. He wants them to win. He is an enemy of the United States. And the fact that Terry McAuliffe will put his arms around him and that he would be the biggest celebrity at the Democratic Convention tells you a terrible truth about what's happened politically in this country.
Pittsburgh, hello.
Hello, Mr. Horowitz. It's a pleasure. I wanted to speak about John Kerry's record regarding military spending and the intelligence budget and everything related to the military. His record for 20 years in the Senate and even before that in the early 70s was completely anti-military. Even under President Clinton, with the cuts that President Clinton made, he wanted to make additional $43 billion worth of cuts, and Senator Inouye and Senator DeConcini and other Democrats, fought him on it. And the AP had reported at that time that the cuts would threaten our national security, our U.S. fighter pilots would be endangered, and the battle against the terrorism would have been hampered. And that was just what Kerry's fellow Democrats had to say. I think this needs to be brought out for someone who's claiming in his speech that he's pro-military, that he's going to protect the United States. That's not his record.
This is true. If you go up to frontpagemagazine.com, my website this morning, the lead story is called John Kerry, the Anti-American War Hero. And it's about the fact that the North Vietnamese communists have a war crimes museum. Of course, it's about our war crimes, in which Kerry is a hero, has a place of heroism in this communist museum. Kerry spent 5 months fighting in Vietnam and the next 30 years attacking his own country. He came back and not only did he attack America, but he attacked his own comrades in the field, which is in some ways even more unforgivable, accused them of war crimes and war atrocities, and accused the United States of systematically conducting these. I watched Kerry on the Cavett Show on C-SPAN, which has done a tremendous service by replaying these broadcasts, and you can see there that he thinks that the communists were just nationalists and basically was happy to see them win. What the caller says is absolutely true. He came into Congress. He opposed America's war against communism in the 80s in Central America, something he not only glossed over at the convention, but put himself on the right side of the Cold War, which he wasn't on when he was in the Senate, and did propose, after the first World Trade Center attack, massive cuts in U.S. intelligence and in the military. He has been in the far left of the United States Senate for his entire stay there. So insofar as he has any core beliefs, and it's not clear to me that he does, I think his wife does, and they are very left-wing beliefs. John Kerry is not what he represents himself to be these days.
Cincinnati, Ohio, Democrat. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Horowitz.
Morning.
2 points. One is you can always tell that someone's not giving you the whole truth when they don't have anything good to say about the other side. So that's one way I can tell that you're kind of drunk on your own ideas. Number 2,